my name is Danica and today I have my March wrap-up. The first book I read in March was The Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a collection of short stories with mostly Nigerian protagonists. They take place between the US and Africa. I loved this book. I was expecting to like it, but I ended up just adoring the writing style. I'm pretty sure I've read one of her other books in a university class, but I'm gonna have to go back and reread it and read her other one because I loved this. I was also happily surprised that there are a couple of stories in here with queer characters. There was one story in particular that just blew me away. It's called Jumping Monkey Hill and it's about a writer's retreat in Africa, and it just so masterfully tackles sexism, racism, the nature of storytelling. By the end of the story I had to put the book down and walk it off and just process it because it just was amazing. So obviously I highly recommend this one. It's definitely one that I'm going to keep and reread in the future. After that I picked up Beloved by Toni Morrison. This was my first Toni Morrison book and it's one that took me a while to read just because the subject matter was so intense. It also felt like one of those books where just reading it once hardly counts as reading it at all. I feel like I have to read criticism of it and reread the book and maybe write about it myself before I can even really say that I've read it at all. Even though it's been a while since I've had to write an essay, I was reading it just seeing how much material there would be for so much critical discussion. I can definitely see why people love Toni Morrison, but it's probably going to be a while before I pick up another one of her books because they're just so intense to read. At least this one was. It felt so emotionally taxing to read, which makes total sense. It's about slavery and it's about some of the most horrific things that can happen to people, so of course it's going to be a difficult thing to read about, but I think that her books are probably ones that I'm going to want to space out. After Beloved, I really wanted to pick up something a little bit lighter, so I picked up the Kashimashi Manga Omnibus Volume 1 by Akahori Satoru. I wrote a long review about my mixed feelings about this book at the Lesbury, which I'll link down below, so I won't try to rehash all of that. But basically this is a story about a boy who is turned into a girl by aliens and then lesbian hijinks ensue, and it's obviously so cis-sexist just from the premise alone, and the execution follows that. There's basically no mention that trans people even exist. And it goes completely unquestioned that your body dictates your gender, but at the same time I have to admit that I really enjoyed reading it anyways. It was a total fluffy, light read. I think it's just a reality of life that you're gonna enjoy things that are problematic, and you just have to acknowledge that. So this is a totally cis-sexist premise for a book, but I still found it enjoyable and I'm still probably gonna read the next one. I'm kind of trying really hard to read it as a trans story because there are little hints that maybe it's not as straightforward as it first appears, but And then I picked up what I thought was a queer young adult book, which is The Chaos by Nalo Hopkinson. It turns out to just have queer secondary characters. The main character is straight. It is about a mixed-race teenage girl who has a mysterious tar-like skin condition and who keeps hallucinating floating horse heads and is just trying to keep her place on the cheerleading team. I knew this was kind of a fantasy dystopian book, but I didn't take the title as literally as I should have. This book is probably the weirdest thing I've ever read. Basically, at some point a volcano blows up and everything just turns into chaos. Like street lamps just turn into giant highlighters when they're not a stack of dead rabbits, and Sasquatches and dinosaurs roam the streets. It's like if you've seen The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and that point before they achieve normality where everyone turns into yarn. It's like that, but for most of the book. It's like your friend trying to tell you about that weird dream they had last night for 100 pages. It was way too over the top for me, and even the way the main character reacts a lot of the time seemed completely bizarre and irrational. I'm still gonna read more of Nalo Hopkinson's work because I really liked The Salt Roads by her, but this one was not a favorite for me. After that I read Colonize This, Young Women of Color on Today's Feminism, edited by Daisy Hernandez and Bushra Rehman. This This was another gift by the lovely Patricia of Walk in the Woods, who was very kind and sent me this. I loved this one. It's a collection of personal essays by women of color about feminism and other related topics. It's extremely readable and thoughtful. It has contributions from a wide range of experiences. I was especially impressed by how many of the contributors were queer, which shouldn't surprise me because one of the editors is bisexual. This was published in 2002, so a lot of the events that they're describing are a little outdated. For instance, 9/11 is frequently described as being a really recent event. But unfortunately, the issues that are described are still very relevant today. The only complaint I really had was that there weren't really any essays about trans experiences or experiences with disability that I remember. This is still one that I would highly recommend. If you're a little bit intimidated about picking up feminist books on feminist theory, I would recommend something like this because it's really easy to read, but it tackles really big subjects, and it's always good to get away from white feminism and something a little bit more intersectional, so I would definitely recommend this one. The audiobook that I listened to all month was Last Man in the Tower by Aravind Adiga. It's a premise that I found really interesting. It's about basically an apartment building in India where the society is offered just an astronomical amount of money for everyone to leave the apartment so it can get torn down and something better can be built. But there is one person who refuses the offer and basically screws it up for everyone else. And it's about the tension in this building as there's one last person who won't agree. Unfortunately, I didn't feel like this worked very well as an audiobook, at least. It follows a lot of different perspectives from different characters who all live in the building, and even though the narrator was fantastic at giving every character different voices and different accents, it was still difficult to keep track of everyone. On top of that, it was one of those books where it takes a really long time just to get to the premise of the book. Like, you know going into it, just from the title, that there's going to be one last person who is refusing, but it takes you at least half the book to get to that point, and it made it feel really slow to me. I felt like I was listening to this audiobook forever, so I didn't enjoy it that much. I'm sure it would work better as a physical book that you read, but as an audiobook experience, I didn't really enjoy it very much. And lastly, I finished The Back of the Turtle by Thomas King. You might remember how much I love The Truth About Stories by Thomas King, so I was really excited to pick this one up. At first I was a little bit confused about the context of the story, but I really loved the writing and the characters, and then it all became clearer as I went on. It's not like an action-packed story, but I still really loved it and seeing how everyone was interacting and kind of this slow build of the story, this recovery story. I even enjoyed reading the businessman's point of view, which is not something I usually would have, so congratulations to Thomas King for somehow making that interesting. The only downside I had for this book was that the ending didn't totally feel gratifying to me. It worked, but I was kind of hoping that the whole CEO storyline would somehow be wrapped into the greater story more, and that didn't really happen. So I still really enjoyed reading it, I just was hoping for something just a little bit more by the end. And those were all the books that I read in March. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them, and if you've got a March wrap-up video, feel free to link it down below and I'll definitely check it out, and thank you for watching. Bye!